Hi, I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. On behalf of Senior Pastors Harold Lee and Debbie Gilmore and the entire congregation of Solid Rock Tabernacle, I would like to welcome you to the broadcast and extend this personal invitation to you to come be with us in one of our exciting spirit filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m., morning worship is at 10 a.m., and Sunday evening worship is at 6 p.m. We also have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study at 7 p.m., where we are taking a journey through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. I think you'll enjoy it. Join us, won't you? 1325 Rudy Road in Alma. We're church the way it should be, and we'll save a seat for you. Now, let's join our service already in progress. Commanded. If a man vow a vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth. So, what is an oath? What is a vow? Yeah, you vow to do something, you make an oath to do something, you swear to do something, okay? Now, this instruction was given to the leaders of the tribe of all the tribes of Israel. So it was Moses that gave it to all the leaders, and then the leaders were then supposed to communicate that to all the other people of Israel within their tribe. Now, a vow made to God is not a small thing. When you make a vow to God, it is something that's important. It's something that you need to do. And I hear people that make vows that not really thinking that they're making vows all the time. Have you ever heard anybody say, and I'm not going to say the actual, but I swear to, okay, they're actually making a vow there. And God takes that very seriously, okay? And God commanded that his people should be careful to keep their vows and to fulfill every oath that they made, right? And I think it's really good. I used to have a shirt. I don't have one anymore. I don't have the T-shirt anymore. It kind of got wore out, and I want to find another one that said, when I joined the military, I took an oath to defend and to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And on the back it says, I've never been relieved of that oath. So when you make an oath, the oath is there, and it stays there, and you have to fulfill that oath. Psalms 15:4 describes the godly man as one who swears to his own hurt and does not change. Yes. Accidentally made a vow, I guess you. Didn't swear. I didn't swear. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Well, if you made a vow that you are, it says if you make a vow that's binding your soul. So in other words, if you make a vow for something, you're supposed to keep that vow until you're either relieved of that vow or that vow has been fulfilled. Okay? Now, ignorance is bliss, yes. Now, I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, but when you get married, you make a vow, and people get divorced. So haven't they broken that vow? Well, there are yes and no. Yes, you have broken the vow, but that decree of divorce actually is a release of that vow, releases you from that vow. Uh-huh. If, yeah. That's how, and it's, if you made that vow and you said, I'm going to do that, but the Lord has said, hey, I'm not really holding you to that, Okay, so if he didn't tell you to do it, then he's probably going to, say, I'm not going to hold you to do that because you didn't vow to me that you weren't going to do that. So, that's a different thing, okay? Now, there are some people who believe, usually based on Matthew 5:34 and 37, that vows or oaths are not permitted for God's people today, that they're not supposed to make a vow or make an oath of any kind. That's why if you go to court or anything like that, or you get sworn in, even in the military or anything like that, they will now say, do you swear or affirm? Means that, I agree with that, okay? That you're not vowing an oath, you're not swearing an oath. You say, I swear or affirm. And they do that a lot in court, I swear or affirm that whatever, And because there's some people that say, I can't make an oath, I can't swear an oath. And it's real big with like Jehovah's Witnesses. They're not allowed to swear any kind of oath in any way. They're not allowed to swear any kind of allegiance to any country or anything. But when Jesus said this on the Sermon on the Mount, what he was saying regarding oaths was an emphasis on truth-telling and honesty. It was not an absolute prohibition to every oath. Okay? Now, I've heard people that have said things like, I swear on my mother's grave, or I swear on my children, or I swear. That's a dangerous thing to do. Okay? You shouldn't do that. All right? Because God may hold you to that.
What's crazy is that some people don't have a clue what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's a form of expression to somebody.
Yeah.
Doing exactly what you're saying they're doing.
Yeah. They don't have a clue what they're saying, and it's very dangerous to do that. But the Bible tells us that oaths are permitted under certain circumstances, but they can't be abused or used as a cover for deception in any way. Okay? As a matter of fact, God himself swears oaths. Hebrews 6:13, Luke 1:73. There God swears oaths. Jesus spoke under oath in court in Matthew 26:63-64. When Jesus was in court, he was speaking under oath. Paul made oaths. Romans 1:9, 2 Corinthians 1:23, Galatians 1:20, 1 Thessalonians 2:5. Paul made oaths there. So vows are often made by people in the Bible. It's not unusual for them to make vow or to swear out an oath, okay? Sometimes it's in a plea for God's help. That happens today, okay? I saw, I don't know if it was a movie or a TV program or whatever it was, but a guy said that, Lord, if you'll get me, was talking to a priest, and he said, I told the Lord if he would get me out of this, that I would become a priest. And the priest says, and the Lord got you out of it. And he says, yeah, and I don't want to be a priest. So a lot of times people, when they're in trouble, they have a problem, they'll try to swear an oath to God. God, I swear I'll go to church if you'll help me out, if you'll get me out of this. I swear I'll do this. I swear I'll do that. All right? And then God gets them out of it. And then the common tendency is when the crisis is past and the prayer has been answered, then there is a temptation for them to forget the vow that they made. Okay? They'll make a vow, God gets them out of it, and then they'd forget the vow. All right? So because God holds us accountable for the vows we make, sometimes it is better to not make a vow. Okay?
Brother Stewart,
Yes.
Ecclesiastes 5:4 and 5 says, when thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it. And it's not talking about when it says pay it, it's not talking about monetary.
Yeah.
For he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better it is that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. And that word pay means fulfill.
Yep.
And what
Yeah.
happens if you don't
If you don't fulfill your vow,
you're held accountable?
okay. A common and overlooked and unappreciated sin among God's people is the sin of broken vows. You're still held accountable. If you promise something to God and failing to live up to what you promised Him, that is a sin. Now, under the Old Covenant, it was commanded to make an offering to atone for breaking a vow. If you broke a vow, you had to make an offering. Okay? So, therefore, those who honor God will not be quick to make vows to God, especially unwise vows. Okay? Because if it's going to cost you monetarily, because when making an offering, it costs you monetarily. If it was going to cost you in that way, it was like, I'm not going to make a vow that I can't fulfill. Right? Because it's going to wind up costing me. So that will discourage people from doing it, and it will make them serious about the vows that they do make. So if they make a vow, they need to be serious about the vow they make. Okay? And you have to be careful, because I hear people say it just offhand all the time. I swear, this or that or the other. I swear. Well, when you say that, you're actually swearing a vow. You are making a vow because you are swearing to something. And if you don't, if you don't fulfill a vow, God says it's a sin. Okay? So be careful, and the vows that you do make sure you're serious about the vows that you do make. Okay? Huh? Yeah, I swear I didn't eat that last cookie, but I did. Huh? Yep. But God will regard broken vows as sin to be confessed and repented of. All right? But there is a regular vow that we should all make. Anybody know what that vow is? Vow that we should all make. That is a vow to praise God. We should vow to do that all the time. All right, verses 3 to 5. If a woman also vow herself by a bond in her father's house in her youth, and her father hear her vow and her bond wherewith she hath bound her soul, her father shall hold his peace at her, all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand. But if her father disallow her in the day that he heareth not any of her vows or of her bonds wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand, and the Lord shall forgive her because her father disallowed her. So this command refers to a woman who is young and unmarried, right? And still living with her parents. The vows of a young woman in circumstances like this were subject to review or approval by the father. Okay? Now, he could approve of her vow by silence. If he hears the vow and he doesn't say anything, then the vow stands. Okay? Basically, by keeping your mouth shut, it is an acknowledgement and an agreement. All right?
I feel like that's part of for a lot of people these days.
Yeah. So the silence was understood as agreement. And you got to be careful. Even today, there's some people that will try to do that. That they'll send you something and they'll say, we want you to do this, or we're holding you to something. And if you don't answer within a certain period of time, then we're going to assume that you agree with it, and we're going to go on. Like somebody trying to collect a debt, they say, hey, here's a debt that we think that you have. Now, unless you dispute this in the next 7 days, then we assume that you agree with it, and we're going to keep trying to collect it. All right? So the father also had the right to disapprove of his daughter's vow, or to declare the vow invalid. He could say, nope, don't agree with that. And then the vow's wiped out. Okay? Doesn't matter what it is she vowed. If the father said, nope, not going to do it, then that was it. It was wiped out. All right? Now let's look at verses 6 to 8. And if she had at all a husband when she vowed, or uttered aught out of her lips, wherewith she bound her soul, and her husband hear it, and held his peace at her in the day that he heard it, then her vows shall stand, and her bonds wherewith she bound her soul shall stand. But if her husband disallowed her on the day that he heard it, then he shall make her vow which she vowed, and at that which she uttered with her lips, wherewith she bound her soul, of none effect, and the Lord shall forgive her. So the woman that we considered in verses 3 to 5 is a vow, is the one of a young woman, okay, that is not married and still living with the parents. All right? Now we're looking at a woman that's considered, that we're going to consider if she has become married. And in such cases, her new husband had the right to approve or disapprove her vows. And again, just like the father, he could accept them by his silence. The day that he hears of it. All right? Now, she may make the vow, and then it's 3 days later that he actually hears of the vow. But when he hears of it and he knows of it, then he can either stay silent and let it stand, or he can say, yeah, I agree with it, or he can say, no, I don't agree with it. But the day that he hears it, he has to either agree with it or disagree with it. Okay? If a husband objects to the vows made by his wife, he had the right to overrule her. Say, nope, overruled, boom. And God considered the wife released from such disapproved vows. Okay? Now, so we have the young girl that's not married living with her parents. We have the woman that is married living with her husband. Now, what about the other ones? But every vow of a widow and of her that is divorced, wherewith they have bound their souls, shall stand against her. Okay? Here, the case of a woman who was neither in her father's house or married was considered. And that the widow and the divorced woman have the same status regarding vows is pretty significant. All right? Now, some people claim that divorce in biblical times was only a certain legal fiction, that a woman was always to be considered the wife of the husband who had dismissed her. Because if you remember, only the husband could sue for divorce, basically. It was only the husband that could ask for a divorce. The wife couldn't, right? Yet, some people will say that even though he has dismissed her and they're divorced, she's still considered that he is still considered her husband. All right? But that's not what's being said here. This verse clearly indicates that the divorced woman has the legal status of one who is a widow, which means that she has become an independent agent. She's on her own with this. Okay? And like the widow, her former husband is, in a sense, dead to her. And such vows made by a woman not living with her parents and not married to a husband was considered binding. Any vows that she made would stand against her. Right? All right, verses 10 to 16. And if she vowed in her husband's house or bound her soul by bond with an oath, and her husband heard it and held his peace at her and disallowed her not, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she bound her soul shall stand. But if her husband hath utterly made them void on the day he heard them, then whatsoever proceedeth out of her lips concerning her vows or concerning the bond of her soul shall not stand. Her husband hath made them void, and the Lord shall forgive her. Every vow and every binding oath to afflict the soul, her husband may establish it, or her husband may make it void. But if her husband altogether hold his peace at her from day to day, and he establisheth all her vows, or all her bonds which are upon her, he confirmeth them, because he held his peace at her in the day that he heard them. But if he shall any ways make them void after that he hath heard them, then he shall bear her iniquity. These are the statutes which the Lord commanded Moses between man and his wife, between the father and his daughter, being yet in her youth and in her father's house. So, Numbers 36 through 8 has in mind the vows that newly married women carried into their marriage. Right? They make the vow before they get married, and then they carry it in there. Right? Numbers 30, 10 to 15 has in mind vows made by a woman in her married state. So 6 through 8 is talking about somebody who has made a woman who has made a vow, then gets married, then the husband hears about it and says, no, we're not doing that. Right? These last ones between verses 10 to 15 are talking about a woman who is already married and has been married and makes a vow. All right? And as before, if the husband confirmed his wife's vow, either by silence or by specific approval, then he was responsible to make sure that the vow was fulfilled. Okay? It says, every vow and every binding oath to afflict the soul, her husband may establish it, or her husband may make it void. This was an outworking of the principle of leadership. When God declares someone to be in a position of rightful authority, and others are expected to submit to that authority, the head is accountable before God for the result. So, women, your husband is the head of the household. Okay? He has been given leadership over the household. And I know some of you women going, not in my household. Yeah. So, you know. And I know what some of you were thinking. Yeah. The wife's saying, yep. He wears the pants in the family, but I tell him which ones to put on. You know. And then they tell you how bad you look. You know.
Force us to tell them how pretty.
Yeah. I like that. I like that when I was fixing to go out somewhere, and she, you're not wearing that, are you? No. No, I'm not wearing this. I just put this on for the heck of it, you know.
I've literally told Lester to go to change.
Yeah.
You're not wearing that.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband died.
Uh-huh.
But then the brother of her husband takes over,
Mm-hmm.
takes her in and so does he have that power?
If they get married, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So the head is always and it's not just in the household, it's anywhere that God puts someone in authority over someone else. That person and somebody else is expected to follow that authority. Whether it's in government, whether it's in a church setting, whether it doesn't matter whether it's in a business, however it is, if there's somebody in authority and people are expected to submit to that authority, the person who is in authority, the head, he is accountable to God for what happens. Okay? So he has to answer for it. Right? When God grants authority, he also commands accountability. If he gives authority to somebody, he's also going to make them accountable for everything. That's why pastors say, hey, we got to be careful who we allow to preach from the pulpits. We got to be careful what we preach from the pulpits, what we teach, what the things that we do, because we're held accountable for that. All right? So you have to make sure that you know what's going on. And the head is always held accountable for the people that are supposed to follow. That takes care of chapter 30. Now let's get into chapter 31. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Avenge the children of Israel of the Midianites. Afterwards shalt thou be gathered unto thy people. So, if you'll remember, the Midianites were that nomadic people associated with the people of Moab. There was a lot of different groups of people that were involved with the Midianites who called themselves Midianites. Okay? And God commanded that they be attacked in retribution for the seduction of Israel. If you remember a few chapters ago, they seduced Israel. Y'all remember that? Huh? Well, now we're finding the details on this, okay? Again, you have to look at, the Bible is going to tell us things, and then it's going to go back and fill in blanks a lot of times. All right? It's just like in Genesis. It confuses a lot of people in Genesis where they say, well, it said God created this and this and this on this day, and then later on it says, something, that God created this and this. So when did it happen? Well, a lot of times when the Bible is written, it's written kind of like a newspaper article, or for those of you who don't know what newspapers are.
It basically states like the main event, and then
Yeah, it gives you the main event, gives you clickbait, and then you click on the clickbait, and that's what tells you actually what happened. Okay, so it's this is kind of a flashback. It just gives us more details. We know the Midianites are destroyed. Now we're getting into the details on how that happens. All right. So, God commanded that they be attacked in retribution for their part in the seduction of Israel. Remember, they seduced them into sexual immorality and idolatry. The emphasis is on the fact that the Lord spoke to Moses in initiating this attack. All right? This wasn't about personal revenge, the conquest of territory, or the lust for plunder, because it was specifically commanded by the Lord. Okay? Now, this was done as much to wipe out or destroy the Midianites as it was a test of Israel's obedience. Now, we're often uncomfortable with the idea of vengeance, right? Because it doesn't seem to be consistent with God's love. And you hear that a lot in the world today. What if God is love, he wouldn't be vengeful? Well, yeah, he would, because God's righteous too. Okay? But in the right context, vengeance is something good that God pursues, and Scripture repeatedly speaks of the vengeance of God as a positive thing, not as a negative thing. Okay? Evil comes with the vengeance of man. When man tries to do do vengeance, it's evil. But God directs his vengeance against the immoral, idolatrous, and the unjust. Okay? Yet, his vengeance is also self-limiting. If we go out for vengeance, we're probably going to want to completely destroy, whoever it is, whatever it is. Right? God limits his vengeance, and he limits it according to his great mercy.
When we exact vengeance on someone, we do it without any compassion.
Mm-hmm.
God, when he punishes, when he pours out his vengeance on someone, he still does it with compassion.
Yes, yes. He still does it with compassion and love and mercy. All right? All right? Now, in this instance, Israel is in a unique role, okay, with a special call to be the instrument upon God's people of God's vengeance upon people of various ethnicities, I guess you could say, amongst the people who were either in or near Canaan. All right? There is something no individual acting on his own authority can rightly take upon himself today. Okay? Now, there is no community defined specifically as the people of God, such as a church congregation or a denomination. Okay? There's no one congregation that can say, we're the children of God, nobody else are. There's not one denomination that can say, we're the children of God and nobody else are. Huh? Yeah.
That is when they start doing that too much, it's a cult.
Mm-hmm.
It goes into demonic.
There are some that do that.
There are some that do that, yeah. The Mormons are, we're the children of God and nobody else are. Jehovah's Witnesses, we're the children of God, nobody else are. We've got it right, everybody else has got it wrong. Now, Christians, we are children of God. We are God's children. We are God's people, okay? But at that time, the only ones that were able to say, we are God's people, were the Israelites. Those are the only ones that could say that. Nobody else could, all right? So this has the same unique place that ancient Israel had in God's plan. While God had not called the church as his instrument of vengeance, God has ordained certain instruments of society, such as government, to take vengeance on evildoers. Romans 13, 1-4 tells us that. Government has been ordained by God. All power is ordained by God. All power is ordained by God. How they use that power, that's up to them, okay? Because they have free will. But God allows them to have that power. Yeah, Yeah, God gives them that power. It was just like Pilate. When Pilate says, "I have the power to release you or to kill you," and Jesus says, "Only power you got is the power my Father gave you. That's the only power you got." If it wasn't for Him giving you the power, you wouldn't have it. So, we rely on other people rather than us taking vengeance on people. Okay? Now, Moses did die some months after this, but he did not die immediately afterward. But this was something that had to be accomplished before his work could be considered complete. All right. Verses 3-5. And Moses spake unto the people, saying, Arm some of yourself unto the war, and let them go against the Midianites and avenge the Lord of Midian. And every tribe 1,000 throughout all the tribes of Israel shall ye send to the war. So there were delivered out of the thousands of Israel 1,000 of every tribe, 12,000 armed for war. So Moses promptly obeys and does what God told him to do. This was something that God called Israel to do together as a people. It wasn't just a few individual tribes that did it. God said everybody, because God wanted them to think and act as a unified people. Not 12 different factions, a one unified nation is how he wanted them to act. Okay, in verses 6 to 11. And Moses sent them to war 1,000 of every tribe, them and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, to the war with the holy instruments and the trumpets to blow in his hand. And they warred against the Midianites as the Lord commanded Moses, and they slew all the males. And they slew the king of Midian beside the rest of them that were slain, namely Evi, and Rechem, and Zur, and Hur, and Reba, 5 kings of Midian. Balaam also the son of Beor they slew with the sword. And the children of Israel took all the women of Midian captive and their little ones, and took the spoil of all their cattle, and all their flocks, and all their goods. And they burnt all their cities wherein they dwelt, and all their goodly castles with fire. And they took all the spoil and all the prey, both of men and of beasts. Now, this was unusual, and marked this in an unusual way, or in a unique way, as God's battle, by putting all of the holy things before the battle. Now, it doesn't say exactly what those were. Most commentators agree that it was probably the Ark of the Covenant, was probably among whatever it is that they went into battle with them. But it doesn't specifically says, it just says the holy objects, okay? And according to the custom of the day, all the males were killed. They went in, they killed all the men, right? And the women and children were taken as slaves. And all the possessions that were there, they were taken as spoils. All right, but let's look at verses 12 to 20. And they brought the captives and the prey and the spoil unto Moses and Eleazar the priest, and unto the congregation of the children of Israel, unto the camp at the plains of Moab, which are by Jordan near Jericho. And Moses and Eleazar the priest and all the princes of the congregation went forth to meet them without the camp. And Moses was wroth with the officers of the host, with the captains over thousands and the captains over hundreds, which came from the battle. And Moses said unto them, Have ye saved all the women alive? Behold, these caused the children of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to commit trespasses against the Lord in the matter of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known man by lying with him. But all the women, children that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. And do ye abide without the camp 7 days, whosoever hath killed any person, whosoever hath touched any slain, purify both yourselves and your captives on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. And purify all your raiment, and all that is made of skins, and all work of goat's hair, and all things made of wool. All right, what is this saying?
Basically, they took all the women and children, killed all the male children, and killed all the women that lied with.
Okay. All right, so see, Moses is a little bit mad at him now, okay? Because they didn't do really what they were supposed to do. They failed to see the great danger of sexual immorality and idolatry that was before them, that were posed by these women who had before led the men of Israel into these exact sins. God's people may be deceived by things that were a threat, but they don't seem to be a present danger. We can see things now that we know are a threat, but they don't look like they're a present danger right this second. So we kind of ignore those things. All right? So the Israelite officers of the army thought, these women are safe. It's not a big deal. But they were more dangerous to Israel than any army of mighty warriors. Israel could overcome mighty warriors if they were spiritually strong. Right? But if they were seduced into immorality and idolatry, then they were definitely going to fail. Right? Therefore, all the women who had known a man intimately were to be killed. Right? So all of the women that had husbands or had known a man, they were taken out, they were killed. Right? But the ones who were not related to the immorality and idolatry of the Midianites could be kept alive. Because remember, the Midianites were one of those groups of people that, while everybody else was pretty much, had priests, they had priestesses. They had female that were in charge of that. And a lot of their worship, especially of Baal, a lot of their worship was through ritual prostitution. So he says, no, you're going to kill all of those. And then he says, take every male among the children. That means any child that was a male. Right? He said, take any of them, they also had to be killed. Right? Seems a little harsh, doesn't it? Because, we see children here, male children here, and we think, man, that's kind of strong, isn't it? But even though it was harsh, it was done with the understanding that in the ancient culture, the boys would have grown into men, and these men would have had a solemn responsibility to avenge their father's death, okay? And to perpetuate Midianite culture, which was under God's judgment. Okay, so this harsh judgment can kind of make us uncomfortable, but it is rooted in both God's fundamental right to judge and his merciful granting of much time for the people to repent. He gave them a lot of time to repent. They didn't do it. So we have to trust, and we can trust, that God is a righteous judge. Okay? Now, Israel's soldiers were triumphant and carried out God's will in attacking and defeating the Midianites. Yet by carrying out God's will, it involved a lot of death, obviously. A lot of people had to die. So the soldiers were commanded to wait 7 days outside of the camp before they came back into the camp of Israel. As well, anything of the Midianites and the spoil that they had taken had to be purified. Right? Once it was purified, then it could be used. But they had to purify it first. All right, verses 21 to 24. And Eleazar the priest said unto the men of war which went to the battle, this is the ordinance of the law which the Lord commanded Moses. Only the gold and the silver, the brass, the iron, the tin, and the lead, each thing that may abide by fire, ye shall make it go through the fire, and it shall be clean. Nevertheless, it shall be purified with the water of separation. And all that abideth not the fire ye shall make go through the water. And ye shall wash your clothes on the 7th day, and ye shall be clean, and afterward ye shall come into the camp. So all the material spoil had to either be purified by fire or cleansed with water. And only then could it be used among God's people? Things that would be destroyed by passing through the fire, then it could be purified with the water of purification. You remember what the water of purification is? The water of separation, purification? You remember what that water was? Huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was water that was sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer. Okay? This is a pattern of how God uses fire and water to purify his people even today. The fire of pressing difficulty, all right, and the water of God's pure word. The spoil is divided among the soldiers and the nation at large. The half belonging to the congregation. All right, this is getting into 25 and 54. We're not going to read all of these, all right, because that's a long thing and it's just going to tell you basically what I'm telling you now. The spoils were divided. All the spoils were divided. Okay? Half among the soldiers, half among the nation. Okay? So half the spoils were given to the soldiers, kind of as their payment for battle, and half was given to the other people, the nation. Okay? The half belonging to the congregation, just the half belonging to the congregation. It's not all of it. This is just half of it that belonged to the congregation. Was 337,500 sheep. That's a lot of sheep. Okay? 36,000 cattle. This accounting of spoil formed the defeat of the Midianite shows a remarkable amount of plunder. They got a lot of stuff out of this. Okay? Now, after this is over, after this is all over, the battle is complete. Everything is done. The officers take account of the men who were under their command. Each one of them takes an account of all their men, and then they report to the higher-ups, to the higher-ups, to the higher-ups, until finally the ones that were the main generals or the ones in charge, they go to report to Moses. And when they report to Moses, they report that not a single man was lost. There was not a single man missing in all of it. How many did they take into battle? 12,000. They took 12,000 men into battle, and not a single man was missing. Not a single one. Okay? Now, there was a special gift from the officers as well, because the officers, obviously, they get a little bit more. Right? But they made a special gift, and it was made in gratitude for God's remarkable protection of the Israeli army. None of them died. There's 12,000 of them went out, and they all came home. That's pretty good, all right? Now, this generous gift belonged to the Lord, and it's going to be used as a memorial and in the service of the tabernacle. This shows that the new generation of Israel, the one that was soon going to take the promised land, was showing itself to be a generous people. All right? Very much in contrast to the generation of their fathers that perished in the wilderness. Okay? Now, what was this gift, you may ask? I'm so glad you asked me. It's a very good question. Let me tell you what it was. The gift was 16,750 shekels of gold. Quite a bit, yeah. Okay. The normal amount that they were supposed to give, that they would normally give on that, was like a half a shekel per person. All right? So what they gave was almost 3 times the amount that they were supposed to give. That's how grateful they were. Okay? That would be like saying that I'm only supposed to give $1, for whatever, and I wind up giving $3 or $4, whatever 3 times that is going to be. Huh? Yeah, about $3, whatever it is. You're supposed to give $20 and you wind up giving $60. You're giving 3 times the amount that you're supposed to give. All right? So, they said that was what they were supposed to give was 1/2 shekel per person. So this was to make acknowledgement to God for the preservation of their lives, because he saved all of their lives. Imagine going to war. How great would that be for a nation to go to war and not lose any soldiers? You'd have to know that, God's really on your side if you can go to war and not lose anybody. Okay? They went out with 12,000. They came back with 12,000. All right? And that, my friends, finishes chapter 31. We're getting close to the end of Numbers. We still got a little ways to go, but we're getting close. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's? No? All right.
I was thinking about something, though.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org. That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org. On behalf of the pastors and congregation here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, we pray you have a blessed week, and we invite you to join us in person or on one of our future broadcasts.